Hey everyone, welcome to the Coffee People podcast presented by our friends at Roastery Coffee Packaging. More on them later. Thank you for being here today. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. You can follow or subscribe to our show, Coffee People, wherever you're listening, but you'll only find the bonus context, links, recaps to the episode on coffeepeoplepodcast.com. Our guest today is Sam Larobardiere. I had to write that out phonetically to make sure I got it right. He's the co-founder and operator of Theory Coffee Roasters in Redding, California, which has 3 locations now, and more recently was part of launching Podium Coffee Club that shares only award-winning coffee roasters. Learn more about Theory as you listen along today at theorycoffee.com. And I don't know about awards, but this cup that I've got is pretty good, and I hope that you've got one that sates your desire for a good cup of coffee today as you listen to our episode featuring Sam Larobardiere of Theory Coffee Roasters. Enjoy. Sam, I welcome you to Coffee People. I appreciate you're here and that we're meeting for the first time. Would you mind introducing yourself with your full name, because I didn't want to butcher it by telling everyone what it is.
Yeah.
And where you work and what your role is.
Sure. My name's Sam Larobardiere. That one's always a mouthful for everybody, but it's pretty phonetic, just like it's spelled, except for when you get to the end. So Larobardiere. I own a couple companies. The one that is probably takes a majority of my time right now is Theory Coffee Roasters. So we're in Redding, California. We are a collection of we have 4 shops. We have a scratch bakery, and then we have obviously our wholesale roasting arm as well. So that's kind of the overview of the business. And then my role day to day, I've done a decent job, I think, of working myself out of a lot of the day-to-day roles. And so I spend my time focused on, growing the business, handling things that are not able to be handled by managers, or helping managers work through things that they're unsure of. And then I'm also heavily involved with the green coffee buying side of our business. Actually, that's my role. And then also quality control. So every week we taste all of the coffees that we roasted for the 7 days prior, just to make sure that quality is on point. And also, if anything, is tasting better, then we can reset profiles or change profiles if something's not tasting great. So we're always just kind of optimizing coffees week to week. So that's the overview of my role there.
You said something right at the beginning of that you successfully worked yourself out of a lot of day-to-day roles.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean there's nothing to do. It just means there's new things to do. I'm
Yeah.
assuming when you started this, the day-to-day was your focus, and what got you going and excited about it. Was it always a plan for you to become this bigger picture puppet master, so to speak?
I think no, I think this has been a journey of just figuring it out as I go. And so initially, I didn't want cafes. I thought, I just want to roast coffee, right? Like that's what most coffee roasters, if you ask them what they want to do, they just say, I just want to roast coffee. And so I loved roasting coffee. I still do love roasting coffee, but I also got bit by this other bug that I wasn't necessarily expecting, which is wanting to grow. So we opened our first cafe in 2018, I think, 2017. So we opened in 2017, and within a year, we were kind of bursting at the seams. Thankfully, like we had really really good response to what we were doing, and so at that point it was like, well, I think we need to start thinking about a second shop. And so then we started thinking about a second shop. And in order to get the second shop off, I realized like, hey, I've got to pass off some of these, spending 8 hours a day behind the roaster no longer made sense. So it wasn't necessarily that was the plan from the beginning. It was just more of a function or a result of, necessity to grow. Or I mean, we could have stayed one shop, but then, that thought of opening the second shop just became, I don't know, a little intoxicating. And the thought of taking another risk, it felt good on me, So I was like, yeah, let's try it. And so then 2 became 3 and 3 became 4. And along the way, it's just like, if you can't figure out how to trust team and build team and pass off your day-to-day responsibilities, more and more and more, especially like routine things that you're doing every single day, man, that's going to be a stressful scenario for you. So in order to remain sane and healthy and happy, I had to pass some of those things off.
I think it's an admirable goal to assume that any hospitality person is happy and healthy and sane
Yeah,
for a good
absolutely.
chunk of their career. It's a naturally chaotic, insane industry to work in.
Yeah.
I never realized it because I grew up in it, but when I met my wife and the idea that I would work these weird hours and make bursts of income and then have no income, and then the lifestyle that came with that in my early 20s was
Yeah.
confusing for someone who had worked in retail or as a teller in a bank, where they work 9 to 5 and then go home. And
Yep. Yep. It's a
it's a
shock to
different
the system.
it's a different environment. The people around you have to want to come along a little bit for the ride. And I'd like to just go back a little bit. That's a little bit of my background, but do you have a first memory of coffee even before you were in it, or a first experience that got you started in this, man, this is interesting sort of phase?
I think of what I would call a collection of memories. Some very specific, but um, I was very close with my grandfather, he was a blueberry farmer in Michigan, and he would wake up bright and early. Like, this is like when you're waking up to go to the bathroom as a kid in the middle of the night, and you're like, "What are you doing, sitting on the couch?" So I just remember getting up, as a kid and seeing my grandpa sitting on the couch. He just always had a cup of coffee. He always looked so relaxed, and I knew somehow it was like, this ritual he had before he started, his incredibly challenging day, farming and whatever comes up in that sort of lifestyle. It's just unpredictable. But during those morning hours, he was just very peaceful and always had a cup of coffee.
Hey everyone, just a quick break. I want to say thanks for tuning in to the Coffee People podcast. The show is presented by our friends at Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastar.com. They provide high quality, affordable packaging for coffee, tea, snacks, and more. I thank them for supporting Coffee People, the podcast, and Coffee People, all of you, by offering low minimum quantity orders and making it easy to create customizable packaging for your company. Check out roastar.com. And now, back to the show. I know what that farming community is like. I've
Yeah.
spent early mornings with my grandpa trying to understand why we were outside before the sun had come up.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was certainly I think a memory that has guided me a little bit, because at least ingrained in me the idea that like work doesn't stop just because some clock tells you it's supposed to.
Yeah. I think especially at, the ownership level, that's
Mhm.
very true.
Which is what all farmers really were. I mean, they were small
Yeah.
whether they thought of themselves that way or not, they were business owners.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think that's something that maybe gets lost a little bit. And I don't mean to go off too far on a philosophical bent, but uh, with our with the distance that we've put between most of ourselves in farming, or most of ourselves in some of those jobs that were more common at that time, say 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, kids don't grow up seeing that. And if you don't have a role model for that kind of work, then you don't realize that that's sometimes what it takes.
Yeah.
And I worry about that for the future. I worry about, when I was 14, I went out and got a job at Wendy's, but that job isn't really available anymore, for a 14-year-old anyways. Either an adult has that job or they've automated it in a way. And so
Hmm.
you've been running Theory now for how long, give or take?
Theory started in 2016.
Okay,
So
so almost 10 years.
yeah, yeah, it's about 10 years. So we started off more of like, well, I had a coffee company before Theory, and for about 2.5 years, and then formed Theory with another roaster in our town. So we decided to collaborate and start a company. And we started as like a mobile pop-ups. We had carts, we had a trailer, so we just kind of, you know, followed the opportunity around town, tried to make a few opportunities for ourselves. And yeah, so theory was really a product of that collaboration and the momentum that it brought. Um,
Why pursue the collaboration in the first place? Why, if you're both doing your own thing, what made you think, oh, we should actually do this together?
well, it started on a sourcing trip. So there were at the time, there were three coffee roasters in town, all about the same age. Um, one of the guys had a shop. I was doing like farmers market and wholesale, and my future business partner Jason was doing. He was roasting, small batches, just selling hand to hand. Actually, he worked at another cafe in town, and people would come in, and he'd have his money box with him, and he'd sell them bags of coffee while he was on bar at another coffee shop. It's like, you're gonna get fired, bro. So we went on a sourcing trip to Nicaragua, and while we were there, Jason Miller, who was my former business partner, and I, we were just having these conversations because we were both in a very similar, state of our businesses. And we were talking about, oh, when I get a shop, I want to have this equipment, or I want this culture. I want, and we would just have these conversations, and it was just like this. Yeah, me too. Like, that's what I want. Like, I want the same thing. So I kind of was mulling it over after the trip, and I was like, he and I are either going to compete super hard. It's a small town. It's like a town of less than 100,000 people. And we're going to either compete really hard, and one of us is probably going to lose, just by, the odds of things. But what if we combined our forces? Like, what if we took, because we were operating in different spheres, and I was like, what if I brought the sphere that I'm, working in, and the customers that I have, and he brought, his customers, and we combine them together, wouldn't we be stronger for that? And so, yeah, I started thinking about this like collaborative business model. And I was like, oh, collaboration is really interesting, because collaboration creates a little bit more of like a flywheel effect where, you start off slow, but then when you start collaborating, whether it's, with like, minded people in the same industry, we actually found a lot of success early on with collaborating with people that were like-minded makers, artisans. And then we would find a spot, and we would pop up, and we would invite all of them in. And what we found was that like community would show up. So, if you're a pillow maker, all of your friends and all the people that were supporting your business, they would all be in the same spot at the same time. And it just created this vibrant sense of community that I don't think if we would have tried to do it on our own, I don't think we would have had that level of traction as quickly as we did. Once that started taking place, it was like a flywheel where I was like, oh, now we're trying to keep up with the business rather than just make things happen. It changed the energy and the momentum pretty obviously and pretty quickly.
That period of time, we were all young and innocent and pre-pandemic.
Hmm.
Somewhere along the line, you and your business partner decided to open this first cafe. Did you agree on the branding up front? That's
Yeah,
actually
actually, yeah. My business partner's wife is a very or former business partner, Jason. His wife is a really great designer, and so she actually contributed to that. And we all we all agreed on the branding. It was kind of this timeless, classic element, but it had a boldness about it. That's what we were after at the time. So.
I don't know if it's intentional, but I can't see that hat that you're wearing, which I've seen in photos, and think of like the 1980s Minnesota Twins.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah. We try and have a little fun with our merch. Like this isn't even actually our logo. We use this scripty thing, but merch is just kind of like, yeah, let's just have a good time with it. So.
so at some point in those early days, you end up opening this cafe and you're
Mhm.
off and running. What is you built a little bit of a community, but what is the response once you have brick and mortar and you become uh, for lack of a better term, like a legitimate business, which I think a lot of people
Yeah,
think of
yeah.
when they think of coffee companies.
Honestly, our response was overwhelmingly positive. So we were doing weekend pop ups before we opened the shop, and we still had those weekend pop-ups going, and then behind the scenes we were just building this place out. This is the where I'm located right now is the place where we started our first shop. So we started building it out, and um, I came to Jason. I was like, hey dude, we're out of money. Like we have to open this week or this weekend. He was like, we can't open this weekend. I was like, we have to open this weekend. And I was I was on the book side of things, and he was just, on the training side and making sure that everything was going to open up operationally well. And I was like, we've got to do it. So we just did it. And we opened up, uh, I wouldn't recommend it, but we opened up before we got our certificate of occupancy in our building, just because we had to. I was like, we have no other choice, and we had a line out the door. And so we were doing about, like, on the weekends with our pop up, we were doing like $800, a day. That was a really good day for us. And then when we opened the doors, I think just all of the community, the pouring into the community, the events that we'd done, the collaboration, it all just came to fruition like when we opened those doors. So then we started doing like we did like $1,800, $1,600 to $1,800 on our first day, and we didn't really make an announcement. And then it just kept building and building and building. And before we opened our second shop, we were averaging like a little over $3,000 a day at the shop in a small town. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I think I look back at those days and I'm like, I don't know, I just feel really thankful because I know this is not always the norm with people's stories and when they open the door. But I think just that foundational work that we did that we didn't even know was gonna, we didn't know what the future effect of that was going to be. It just came back, and like people showed up and really supported and kept supporting, and we kept trying to give them a reason to support and minimize our reasons that they wouldn't come back. So we were just very diligent with that sort of thing. Just wanted to make sure everything was better than you would expect it to be from a new business. So
It
yeah,
creates a
it was a
loyalty.
fun time.
Yeah, between you and the town, there's this I would imagine a loyalty of sorts, and your thought earlier that you would eventually compete if you guys both went off on your own seems prescient, I think, in retrospect, because you were able to succeed, but part of that is because there wasn't someone else filling the space at the time, their space,
Yeah,
right?
I think so. I think it worked out. Who knows exactly how it would have worked out, but yeah, when you say that, it's like, yeah, I think if there would have been more resistance, I don't think we would have been able to do the other stuff. The um, bringing two spheres of people in our community together into the same place. I think it would have been one or the other. I think honestly, I think we would have at least cut that success story in half. I would assume, if not more.
The opposite seems to be trending now, where we have almost more coffee shops than we can sustain in a lot of places. Not every small
Yeah,
town yet, but certainly, where I lived in Southern California, for the last 10 years, when I moved to my neighborhood, there was one, maybe two people roasting.
yeah.
When I left, I could walk to seven roasters that had open cafe
Oh my
doors.
gosh.
And so is that something that you see in the market, even in, say, a smaller community of 100,000 or less, where there
Yeah,
seems to be this saturation point coming, or is that something you're concerned about as a wholesaler or an online seller?
yeah. It is. To be honest with you, I mean, we have three really good roasters in town right now. Um, and I think for a town our size, I would say we're fairly well saturated. We have three roasters and we have a lot of different coffee shops. Um, Everybody seems to be doing pretty well though. If somebody new opens, we'll plan for a 5% decline for 3 months, 3 to 6 months, just because it's a small town and it's like everybody you got to go check out the new thing and you got to check it out for a while. But yeah, by and large, we've always come back to. We've steadily grown. I think we had one down year in the past 8 years. So overall, it's worked out for us. But I know I get to chat with a lot of roasters, and especially in metropolitan areas, I think there seems to be a coffee shop and a coffee roaster on every corner, and I don't know how they do it. Their numbers are often surprisingly you know low. Um, so yeah, saturation's a big deal, but it's interesting. It does tell us a little bit about how the specialty coffee market is growing, and that feels optimistic and positive. I know it's one of the fastest growing segments in coffee. So yeah, if you could figure out you know how to stay relevant, I guess, and serve people really well and be consistent with your product and not give people a reason to leave it or leave for forever. Um, I think that's the hard work that we have to do during the times where it seems like something's popping up on every single corner.
The
And
leaving
then
forever part is the hard part, because it only takes one bad experience for someone to
yeah,
say, "F it, I'm out of here."
yeah,
I don't need you as much as you need me, versus like the 300 times you had served them well prior to that.
it's true. It's true, especially when you have options. I
You,
Go
oh
ahead.
yeah, for sure. Sorry to interrupt there. I just wanted to follow up. At what point did the second cafe come around in the timeline?
I think we're about 2 years in.
Okay, so
About 2 years in.
post COVID.
It was kind of during COVID.
Okay,
So what year would that? I think it would have been kind of the tail end. So we signed the lease during COVID. So I think we opened in 2022. The second cafe 2021. Yeah.
well that ties into what we were just talking about, because even though it's still you, it still potentially takes away from the original store's business. So what made
Yeah.
you think now is the right time to expand this in our market, which has been for I mean, I think one thing COVID did when it sent everyone home is everyone got to sit on the couch and look at their phones and be like, oh, that's cool. I actually wish I was
Yeah.
doing that and not the thing I'm doing. And
Yeah.
coffee is one of those things.
Oh, for sure.
So what made you think we're going to come out of this not just, holding tight, but actually expanding?
And I don't know. Um, I think our numbers were at a point where, we were starting. So it was getting challenging because, um, I think we could have built in some efficiencies to our original cafe, but the numbers were at the point where, I was like, we can keep just like pounding this one cafe, with business and customers, and but I think we have enough customers and enough people are excited about what we're doing. We have enough momentum that I think we can open a second cafe. And it's only about 2 miles away from our first cafe, but it's like, if you could, I don't know if you've ever been to Reading, but Reading is split up by the I-5. So you have the west side of town, which is all old downtown, and then you have the east side of town, which is like your Sprouts and Chick-fil-A's and all that stuff. So we start on the west side of town. And east side of town, if you live on the east side of town, you rarely come to the west side of town. If you live on the west side of town, you rarely go to the east side of town unless you're going to Costco or whatever. So we posted up on a new shopping center on the east side of town, not knowing what the overall net effect would be, knowing that we would slow down some of the business from our original cafe downtown. But it was just one of those things where it was like, this is a great location. We're in a shopping center next to a Sprouts, and across the street, or across the same parking lot as a Chick-fil-A. So I was like, well, there's going to be people coming here. And so having a shop where you have built-in foot traffic, like people are already going to be here. Whether we have one shop or two shops, people are going to be in this location. And so it felt, like just a lot of stars aligned. Sales were great at the first cafe. A really good location was opening up at, where we chose our second location. And we were negotiating leases during pandemic. So negotiating a lease during the pandemic was
Favorable.
favorable. Yeah. Yeah. If we negotiated that same lease now, I think we'd be paying, 1,000 more a month, maybe more, so it just all kind of lined up, and we were like, and then the other part was like, we didn't have, a ton of cash reserves at that time. So we had to find someone to partner with to invest. And we found that person. And so we opened the second cafe.
That's interesting. So the partnership for the new cafe is not part of the partnership for the original cafe, or investor in the original cafe, or did
Yeah.
you kind of work something out? And I ask that because I think there's people listening who maybe have a cafe or have a cart and are thinking about taking on money, and that's always scary because with money
Yeah.
comes expectation and opinion that you got to incorporate.
Absolutely. So the original partnership was Jason and I.
Hmm.
And then we brought on an investor, friend of Jason's, who helped us build out our first cafe. And he was a great partner. He's still in the business. He's a great partner, very helpful. Couldn't have opened the first cafe without him. Just really a lot of. I mean, that's a whole other story. But at some point, maybe we should talk about that, because that's always the hardest part of getting started. Is like, where do I get the money? And so then when we went to open the second cafe, well, sorry, let me back up. Jason, we bought Jason out. Joel, my second business partner, and I bought Jason out a few months into opening the first cafe. because Joel and I started talking about opening the second cafe, and Jason was like, I don't no, I don't really want anything to do with that, to be honest. Like I'm happy with where we're at right now. Um, and so he has to be bought out. We're still good friends, but we ended up buying Jason out pretty quickly. So we had some space to take on a third uh, equity partner that could also bring in some much needed capital. So we didn't secure quite enough to open, but it was also allowed us to use our investors' credit worthiness to secure, some loans and stuff to get the rest of the second bit of funding that we needed for the cafe. Um, so yeah, I think honestly, there are a lot of horror stories of business partners. I don't have those. Thankfully, I have great business partners. In all of my businesses, I have great business partners. Um, so, but it is a real commitment that I don't think that I necessarily realized when I was bringing partners on, is that they want to make money. They don't want to just give you money; they want to make money. So now the challenge becomes, how do you make enough money that it still remains worth it to me, the founder, and I can pay my business partners a reasonable sum of money that makes them interested to either keep going or you know stay on as a business partner and not sell their shares to somebody else. So yeah, that's a whole thing that I don't think that most people early on understand. So I think
There's a
it's
lot of business partner stories. I mean, anyone who's thinking about taking on a business partner should talk to as many other people who have had partners as they can and just hear, because
absolutely,
everyone's story is a little bit different, and you'll
yeah,
learn little things that'll change the trajectory of your life. For
yeah,
me, I learned that you shouldn't have a 50-50 business partnership, because
no,
at some point, someone's going to have to make a decision that you disagree with,
yeah,
or vice versa. Speaking of partners, I believe you have a life partner and you have kids.
yep,
How do you balance? And beyond theory, I want to make sure we talk about Podium, which is your new venture as well.
yep.
So you've got multiple businesses going, which feels like it's 100 hours a week, but you also have a family. How do you find balance in there, or do you? Is that a myth that business entrepreneurs can have balance?
I would like to call it more of a myth. I would assume if you're starting a business and you want your business to be successful, I think going into it, too I don't know, with rose colored glasses on is probably not going to be your best perspective. I think you should more plan to work, 60 to 80 hours a week, 4 months at a time. I think you should plan to watch your family go on vacations, and and you're not necessarily going to have that luxury. It's hard, it really is. If you're going to start something and you're going to build it out, unless you're already wealthy, you're going to scrap, and you're going to scrap really hard, and it's going to bring you to the end of yourself and everything that you know, and it's going to potentially break you a little bit over time, and hopefully you can mend and be put back together. But I think that process builds resilience, and over time, I think when you see these business owners that seem like they don't have a care in the world, a lot of times they've exited a business, or they've done that bit of work, the 80 hours a week, so that they can restructure their life. So now they're paying people to buffer the stress for them, but you can't do that right away. I don't think so. I think the work life balance needs to be called a myth for the first 5 to 10 years of starting a business. That's my personal opinion.
Sure. I mean, or they're and I know people like that are very good at this. They're cool as a cucumber, kind of from they're a duck. They're cool as a cucumber from the waist up as they go through the cafe and talk to everyone and smile.
Mm-hmm.
But underneath, it's just chaos.
Oh yeah.
There's a million things going on, and there's a weird. I think there's a weird line in hospitality in particular where you give so much of yourself to your customers and to your staff and your teams if you're in charge, but there's still this forward facing personality that doesn't quite allow all of the chaos or all of that to come forward because that isn't your role. Sometimes you want to say is when someone says, "How's it going today, Sam?" Yeah, I'm assuming you'll be like, "Oh my God, you don't want to effing know." But
Yeah.
on the other side of that, they're coming there for their one luxury, experience of the day. So you
Yeah.
don't want to take that from them.
Correct. I totally agree with that. I think that that's a great metaphor, like the duck with the legs just like going crazy. And we've talked about that as a team. I'm like, I don't care what's happening behind the scenes. Like you could be in utter chaos, but the customer does not need to know any of that. Like you can be 1 minute putting out the biggest fire of your life, but as soon as you're interfacing with a customer, like that all that's you have to compartmentalize that and put that behind you. And I think customers deserve that. Like none of us want to know that you're tired. None of us want to know that like man, it's just like a really rough season for me right now. Like I know that that can seem disingenuous, but to be honest, you that's not that's not what you want from hospitality and customer service. Maybe if you get to know somebody really, really well, as like baristas do over the years, there might be a few people that you can be like, man, rough day. But by and large, I think the customer needs to see that cool as a cucumber duck, just providing a great experience for them and making their day better. So I always tell our team, like, we're here to provide the energy for the conversation. So as soon as you start sucking the energy out of the room or out of the conversation with your "I'm tired" or that sort of thing, it's like that's not hospitality, in my opinion.
I had a early service job in which we had what was essentially a broom closet in the back of the restaurant,
Yeah,
but we called it the scream closet. And so you could be smiling on the floor and then walk down a long hallway and step into the scream closet and just have a
yep.
moment to yourself.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
at some point, you decide, one cafe is not enough, two cafes isn't enough. I'm going to keep going with this. And
yeah,
more recently, you launched something called Podium Coffee. Can you tell us
yeah,
about Podium?
yeah. So
With a
Podium's been a
partner,
real
I might add, he seems to be.
yeah. Yep, I have a business partner who's a really great guy. I'm not going to name him because he has a full time job that if he could get him in trouble. So he's a really great guy.
You're assuming someone else is listening to this, Sam.
I sure hope so. So Podium started. I started competing probably a year and a half into theory. Started competing and having some good results with that, and found it to be a lot of fun and a really great way to you know keep my edge as a coffee roaster, because I was still roasting a bit at that time, and keep my edge as a coffee roaster, and also get a feel for you know what's happening in the specialty coffee world, kind of at the bleeding edge of it, and also met a lot of incredible people at these competitions. So a couple years in, I think I found myself sitting there like, man, a lot of these roasters are not well known, but they're super duper good at their job. They're just maybe not the best at marketing. And I sat there and I was like, well, what can we do, uh, to put these roasters, front and center in the coffee roasting world. And I was like, I think we need a subscription that features all of these award-winning coffee roasters. So fast forward to we Theory won the Golden Bean roasting competition in 2023 or 2024. I guess it's 2023. So we won the Golden Bean in 2023, and this guy reaches out to me and he's like, "Hey, um, I just exited a company and I've owned this domain name for forever, and I want to start acting on it." And the domain he owned was awardwinningcoffees.com. And I was like, "Cool, man. Like, yeah, we'll be on your subscription, but I've been thinking about this for a while. I don't know if you want to chat. I don't want to overstep my boundaries, but if you want some thoughts, I have plenty." And so he was like, "Sure, like download everything you got." And so we just started talking, and little by little, we just kept the conversation going. And he came to visit me. He lives in Seattle. He came to visit, and he's like, "Hey, do you want to be the coffee guy in this whole thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I have some non-negotiables." He's like, "What?" I was like, "We need to change everything, basically." So we went from award-winning coffee to Podium Coffee Club, and so change the name, change the website,
And the concept, just because I don't
rebranded.
want to get too far down that, you rebranded to
Yeah.
Podium because it's all coffees from people who've been up there on the podium
Yeah.
as winners,
Every
right?
month yep, correct. Every month we send you, we kind of curate the list. We send you a coffee from a roaster that stood on the podium of a major US coffee roasting competition. So we pull from Golden Bean, we pull from US Coffee Champs, we pull from Good Food Awards. If you've done really, really well at Coffee Review, we'll definitely consider you. The Roastronics Pro Cup, which a lot of people haven't heard of, it's in its second years, but it's a really great US Coffee Champ, kind of similar roasting competition, happens in parallel with the Golden Bean. So yeah, we find these really great roasters, and then we have them send us samples, and then we'll queue them up to be the roaster for whatever month fits the best for them. We have two products. We have a platinum subscription and a gold subscription. The gold subscription is more like washed coffees, 86 point plus coffees, so they have complexity to them, but there's nothing super duper crazy. And then the Podium Platinum product is like prize varietals, fermentation projects. So we send out a lot of like co-ferments and anaerobics, and heavily fruited naturals, and some geishas. The one that we're sending out this month's coffee is from Goshen Coffee, who won the Golden Bean, their overall winner at the Golden Bean this year. So we're sending out Goshen, and Tony Auger has been top of the heap at US Coffee Champs as well. He's just a fantastic roaster. And so I think, let's see, it's a wine yeast, lychee co-ferment, and it's super duper good. And then that's for the
Honestly, it
platinum.
sounds terrifying to me because that's the kind of coffee I get at home, and I just think, oh my God, I'm going to F this up. So hopefully you have advice for people on how they roast or brew their coffee once they get it at some point.
Yeah, we could be a lot better about that for sure. We're in the talks of, like, we're bootstrapping it, so it's like, you do, and we both have day jobs, so it's like we're doing what we can, but brew guides are coming. They're just, we don't have them yet, so hopefully, yeah, you don't screw it up. But if you're an avid coffee drinker and coffee maker, I think this is for that type of subscriber. So usually they have the gear and the chops to be able to get it right. A brew or
I,
two.
I find that it's one of my problems is I have too much gear. And so then it's like that grocery store problem, right? There's too many
Yeah,
choices. And
yeah,
it's like
totally.
I end up doing the same thing over and over again. On that, I'm wondering, I do this thing with Roastar, the sponsor of the show, where we
Oh,
try
great.
to help educate, anyone listening, future aspiring coffee entrepreneurs. Is there any piece of advice that you've received or that you'd like to offer to somebody listening who's thinking, I want to get into a coffee business?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I really like the way that we started, which is, inserting yourself into the community as much as possible. You don't need a ton of gear. Like when I started, I was just brewing French presses, and I would make AeroPress or a pour over, like for single cups. And then eventually added an espresso machine. I would say as quickly as you can get to that espresso machine, the better you are, because people, obviously if you own a coffee shop, you know that your lattes are your number one seller. So that's going to help you turn the corner. But I think just inserting yourself into the community and being a part of the community is really, really important. A lot of people like to just like open up a brick and mortar and open the doors and hope for the best. I think that the ground that you plow before you do that is really, really important. I would also say that if you do open a shop, do it well. I think that a lot of people get really, really excited that they didn't go into debt to open a shop, and I think by a lot of their finishes you can tell. Finishes being your furnitures, your fixtures, your countertops, your bar front, your lighting. Never underestimate lighting. I would also say that it's a minor, but it's amazing the difference that it makes. So when you're imagining this, I would say get professional help when you're building out your cafe. I think people initially are really, really scared of debt, and I think that that's smart to be scared of debt. But I think understanding how to use debt wisely. If I can borrow money at 8% and make 30% net profit, and I'm assuming that I'm an owner operator at this point, right? I don't make 30% net profit. Don't let me skew that. But I think as if you're an owner operator and you're holding jobs that you would normally pay somebody to do, you might be able to see, let's say you see 20% net profit in your cafe. I would borrow at 8-9% all day long to build out the cafe that's going to go the long haul, rather than one that looks like you use popsicle sticks and rubber bands and duct tape to build it.
There was
So
definitely an era though where the thrift store coffee shop
oh
vibe was a
yeah,
real thing.
it
Uh,
sure was, and I think it still can be. I mean, it still
if it's
can
done
be.
well, uh,
Yeah, we had
then
in
there's
our
something.
when during our time we were like, okay, no black, no black gas pipe shelving and no reclaimed wood. Those were our two. We're not going to do this because it was
Yeah.
just at that time it was like, reclaimed wood, barn wood. Everybody wanted that, and we were just like, no.
You are perfectly
So
describing the last restaurant that I ran. Um, for you, what what is what makes a good cup of coffee or a good coffee? Is it the coffee? Is it the experience? How do you define it? What makes you go, "Oh yeah, this is the right thing"?
I think it's all of the above. I think you should really focus on you know sourcing good quality coffees. I think if you're roasting your own coffee and you're not calling for samples before you purchase coffee, I think you're going to have you're going to have some hits, but you're going to have a lot of misses. And I think being really intentional about the product is very, very important. So setting a high expectation for the quality of coffee, and then living up to that, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, I think is it produces believability for the long haul. And as soon as I talk about this with our team, but as soon as your favorite taco shop disappoints you one time, you're going to give them a second chance probably, but if they do it twice, you're going to start looking for another taco shop. It's the same with coffee. Like that consistency is super important. I also think a lot of coffee shops, a lot of people don't have the true heart for hospitality. And I think that can be a disservice, really truly wanting to make people happy, really truly wanting your customers to have the best day they've ever had, or the best coffee that they've ever had, or at least something that, they can be excited about, I think is really important, and an experience that they can be excited about. So, our baristas, I want them to be warm and friendly. Like I said, provide the energy for the conversation. We have a core value, I don't know if it's worded exactly right, but it's the customer is cooler than we are. Like I want us to have that perspective that, if you have piercings and tattoos, like you have something to overcome when you're engaging with a customer. Like you have to make sure that they know that they are super duper welcome in this space, no matter what they're wearing, no matter what they look like. Treat them like gold. I think those are all really important things. Really great quality product with really great customer service. It's a fairly simple recipe, but it seems to work. And let your decor match your the quality that you're trying to express. I feel it's really important.
Just real quickly, then, based on what you just said, do you hire more for skill or personality?
I hire personalities are number one benchmark for hiring.
I always think that's an interesting, because you want people. It's helpful if somebody comes in and knows what they're doing, but at the same time,
Yeah, yeah, it is helpful, and when they have the right personality, it's just like it's amazing. Um, but if they don't have the right personality and they know what they're doing, I'm not so interested, because I can teach you, and I'm probably going to have to re-teach you a lot of what you do know, because we're probably going to do it differently. So there's still a fair amount of training involved if we want, the consistency from barista to barista. My final hiring thing is like, do I want to hang out with this person? And if the answer is yeah, I want to hang out with them more, then they're gonna have a leg up on somebody that's like, can pour a swan. So
that's how I vote. I think a lot of people do.
yeah,
Do
yeah,
I want to spend an hour having a beer with this person? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And if I can't, well, okay, then I'll go to the next step, which is policy.
Yeah,
Uh, we'll see how it goes. I feel like there's a lot of things that we didn't get to today yet, and I'd love to have you come back and just talk about money
yeah,
for a show,
sure.
or kind of what led up to the younger version of Sam before you grew a beard that the rest of us strive for.
God, it happened
Uh,
so fast.
it I we just celebrated our wedding anniversary, and so my wife had some photos up that popped up on her phone from years
Yeah,
before, and in every one I didn't recognize myself because my beard was so dark. It was so brown, or I mean, it was
yeah.
shocking. I was like, I don't know who that person is. But what did I miss? Is there anything you want people to know before we go today in the show, and what's coming next for you?
Um, I think we covered some good ground for sure. I think, I'm not, I'm still a fairly collaborative guy. So, if anybody has questions, or, you know, anything about what we've talked about today, if they have questions, my email address is available. They can hit me up on Instagram, on my personal Instagram, or the Theory Instagram. I check both of them. Happy to take some time with people and just help. I think I'm at that point in the game where it just is a lot of fun for me to help other people, figure out the treacherous waters of starting and navigating. Once you start, right? There's no great playbook. I did, we were talking today I just hired a new general manager, and she's like, well, what are some book requests that, that I should read? And So we had a little thread going on, and I think a couple of the ones that were mentioned were Setting the Table by Danny Meyer, and also Unreasonable Hospitality by what's that guy's Will Guiadara. Um, I liked Daring to Lead, I think it is, by Brene Brown. And then the one that was the most practically helpful for me was Everything I Know About Running Coffee Shops by Colin Harmon. It was just brass tacks, operational. Yeah, you can read a chapter and then just like literally go implement it. And so, those are some good resources for people.
We'll be sure to share those in our newsletter. I know as a going away gift, I gave my managers at the last place I was in a copy of Yvonne Chouinard's "Let My People Go Surfing," which I took a
Oh,
lot of
cool. I'll have to
lessons
read
from.
that.
I've got a few copies. I'll send you one. We'll call it
Oh,
one.
thank you.
Yeah, you're
Yeah, that'd be
welcome.
great.
Our last question of the hour, and the most probably important one. Actually, I should say I've got two very quick ones. But the first is when you are out and about and you stop into someone else's coffee shop, what are you going to
Yeah.
order?
I'll probably order two drinks. One's going to be an espresso, and one's going to be a pour over or filter coffee, depending. It's interesting. A lot of shops have started to move away from pour overs post pandemic. Um, so I'll order a pour over. If you don't have that, I'll order your drip coffee. Um, yeah, and I'm looking for something that's, I don't know, sounds interesting to me. Maybe a coffee I haven't tried before. So that's my order. Pretty basic, but some form of espresso and water, or coffee and water.
And
Um,
then my last question, the one that I will take with me later today is what's your favorite Keanu Reeves movie?
oh gosh, I do love the Matrix, and then what is it? What is the one? Is it Point Break? Is that a
Point
Keanu
Break with
Reeves?
Patrick Swayze,
Yeah,
the
is that a
surfing
Keanu
movie.
Reeves?
It very much is.
Yeah.
It is. I recently, well, not recently, but I've gone to, there's a troupe, if anyone's listening, check them out. They go around the country doing Point Break live on stage.
Oh
It's like a
wow.
dramatic, creative reading, well worth the endeavor. Sam, I can't thank you enough for being here. We'll be sharing Theory Coffee Roasters social and theorycoffee.com everywhere, and Podium as well.
Great.
Thank you for being here and sharing an hour, and maybe thinking about coming back someday.
Yeah. Thanks for the invite. This was super fun. And yeah, I hope to see you.